Welcome to the Celestial Saga channel. Have you ever wondered how one young man can change the fate of a huge living ship drifting in the space desert? Today we will tell you the story of a young technician who, armed only with his hammer and a sharp mind, accepted the challenge and saved the crew of an ancient civilization. Stay with us to see how his courage and out-of-the-box thinking turned doubts into respect. The Elysium moved effortlessly through the vast, silent expanse of space, its surface a remarkable blend of living rock and bioengineered tree-like structures. Immense and ancient, the vessel stood as a testament to the Veldar's unparalleled mastery of organic technology. Its exterior emitted a faint bioluminescent glow, resembling a living being that seemed to breathe as it glided through the void, each ripple of light marking its passage among the stars. Inside the Elysium, the atmosphere was both tranquil and purposeful. The ship's wide corridors were lined with walls resembling the trunks of ancient trees, their surfaces warm to the touch and softly pulsing with life. Overhead, vines intertwined to form a canopy, their glowing leaves casting a gentle light that replaced the need for artificial illumination. The air carried the rich, earthy scent of foliage, a constant reminder that this was no ordinary machine, but a living organism, nurtured and cultivated by the Veldar for centuries. The Veldar themselves moved gracefully through these halls, their tall, feathered forms radiating an aura of wisdom and serenity. Towering at an average height of 8 feet, they were both imposing and composed, their bodies adorned with intricate patterns of feathers and scales unique to each individual. Their elongated faces bore sharp features and eyes that reflected the light with an otherworldly glow, eyes that had witnessed the passage of millennia. This ancient race had outlived countless stars in their sector, their lives stretching across eons. For the Veldar, time was not a rushing current but a steady, unhurried river. Maturing over nearly 3,700 Earth years, their minds absorbed knowledge and experience at a pace incomprehensible to younger species. Each decision they made was calculated and deliberate, guided by a perspective that prioritized the long-term over fleeting impulses. This patient approach often made them skeptical of the younger, more transient species they occasionally encountered. The Avidians, or humans of Terrara, were particularly puzzling to the Veldar. With their brief lifespans and rapid development, humans often seemed reckless and overly emotional. It was difficult for the Veldar to fathom how beings with such short lives could grasp the complexities of starship maintenance, let alone contribute meaningfully to it. Yet the Veldar were not entirely closed-minded. They recognized the humans' adaptability and ingenuity, even if the pace of their progress often felt unsettling. When the Veldar Lysander decided to allow a young Avidian to join their crew as a starship technician, it was met with a mix of doubt and curiosity. To them, a 17-year-old human, barely out of childhood by their standards, seemed an unlikely candidate to contribute anything of value to the operations of the Elysium. This decision was not merely an opportunity for the Avidian, but a test for the Veldar themselves, a chance to measure their own capacity to adapt to the unpredictable nature of these younger species. As the Elysium continued its journey through the cosmos, the crew prepared to see whether their decision would prove wise or confirm their doubts about the young technician. The docking bay of the Elysium was a marvel of organic engineering, its walls softly pulsing like the heartbeat of a living creature. Nathaniel Stone stepped out of the small Avidian shuttle, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and nervous excitement. A toolkit hung over one shoulder, but it was the worn hammer at his belt that drew attention, a tool he affectionately called the Persuader. Surveying his surroundings, Nathaniel noticed the Veldar crew. Their tall, feathered forms moved gracefully around the bay, their ancient, discerning eyes settling on him with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. One figure, taller than the rest, approached with deliberate steps. This was Lysander, a feathered sage and a figure of authority aboard the vessel. "Welcome aboard, Technician Stone," Lysander said, his voice calm but tinged with caution. His gaze drifted to the hammer at Nathaniel's belt. "I see you've brought a rather primitive tool with you. Is that standard among your people?" Nathaniel grinned, patting the hammer affectionately. "Yep, this here's the Persuader. When things don't cooperate, sometimes you've got to remind them who's boss. Nothing beats a good thump to straighten out stubborn machinery." Lysander raised an eyebrow, his feathers ruffling slightly, a subtle sign of discomfort. "We Veldar prefer more delicate methods. The use of such forceful tools is not common among us." Nathaniel shrugged, his grin widening into a playful smirk. Well, sometimes a gentle touch just won't cut it. It's like trying to loosen a rusted bolt. You can sweet-talk it all day, but sometimes it needs a solid knock to get moving. Besides, he added with a wink, if finesse was all it took, I wouldn't bother carrying this bad boy. The slight ruffling of Lysander's feathers betrayed his unease, though he maintained his composure. I trust you will exercise caution with your methods. The Elysium is not merely a ship, it is a living entity and demands respect. Nathaniel nodded, though the mischievous glint in his eyes remained. Don't worry, boss. I'm not about to go around hammering the old girl into submission. But if something acts up, the Persuader is here to keep it in line. Think of it as a backup plan, just in case gentle coaxing doesn't work. Lysander sighed, clearly torn between amusement and concern. The Veldar do not take youth lightly, he said, his tone shifting. Our species matures over thousands of years, valuing experience and wisdom that only time can provide. It is rare for us to entrust such responsibility to someone as young as you. Nathaniel tilted his head, his grin never wavering. I get it, but sometimes life doesn't wait for you to catch up. You either learn fast or get left behind. And trust me, I've learned plenty, whether it's with a plasma spanner or this hammer. I won't let you down. Lysander studied Nathaniel for a long moment before giving a slight nod. We shall see, he said, his voice measured. Come, I will show you to your quarters and workspace. There is much to be done. As they walked through the Elysium's corridors, Nathaniel couldn't help but marvel at the ship's design. Every surface seemed alive, with vines glowing faintly and walls that expanded and contracted in a slow, rhythmic pattern. This is incredible, Nathaniel murmured, almost to himself, his awe evident as he took in the ship's unique, organic beauty. The Elysium is one of our most ancient vessels, Lysander explained as they walked. It has been with us for many Krone, a living entity that we have cultivated and cared for over generations. It is far more than a machine. It is a part of our history. Nathaniel nodded, feeling a newfound respect for the ship and its people. I'm eager to learn everything I can, he replied earnestly, then added with a cheeky grin. And don't worry, I'll keep the Persuader holstered unless it's absolutely necessary. Lysander glanced at him, and the corners of his mouth curled into what might have been a Veldar version of a smile. You will have your opportunity, Nathaniel Stone. The Elysium is a challenging environment, even for the seasoned among us, but challenges often reveal true potential. Nathaniel smirked, feeling some of the tension in his chest loosen. I'm ready for it. When they reached Nathaniel's quarters, Lysander paused at the door. Rest and prepare yourself, Technician Stone. Your duties begin tomorrow, and we will be observing you closely. Thanks, boss. I won't let you down, Nathaniel said, already mentally racing through the tasks ahead. Lysander gave him a final nod before departing, repeating the same measured phrase, "We shall see." There was something in his tone, anticipation, curiosity perhaps, that Nathaniel couldn't quite place. As the door closed behind him, Nathaniel exhaled deeply, leaning against the wall. The weight of the challenge ahead pressed on him, but so did his determination. He was ready to prove what a Avidian, even a young one, could accomplish, with a plasma spanner in one hand, and if needed, the trusty Persuader in the other. The next morning, Nathaniel stood in the engineering bay of the Elysium, surrounded by the Veldar crew. The space was just as breathtaking as the rest of the ship, large, open, and alive with the soft rhythmic glow of organic components intertwined seamlessly with advanced technology. Vines stretched across the ceiling, their faintly glowing leaves casting a gentle light over the workstations. Lysander was present, along with several senior Veldar technicians whose guarded expressions made it clear they weren't entirely sold on the idea of an Avidian among them. Their deep, ancient eyes studied him with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. One senior technician, feathers tinged in shades of blue and purple, stepped forward. "You are young, even by Avidian standards," he began, his voice tinged with doubt. "Your reputation precedes you, but experience is not something that can be rushed. We, the Veldar Lysander, have spent centuries mastering our crafts. It is difficult to imagine how someone with such a brief existence could contribute meaningfully here." Nathaniel's grin faded, replaced by a sharp smirk. Crossing his arms, he let his gaze sweep over the crew. "Listen, Feathers, I don't need centuries to figure out how to fix things. I've been elbow-deep in starship guts since I was a kid, and I've probably forgotten more about repairing ships than you'll learn in your next 1,000 years of delicate touches. So don't let my age fool you. The Veldar technician's feathers ruffled, a clear sign of unease. "We are not accustomed to relying on brute force," he replied, gesturing toward Nathaniel's hammer, his tone cool, but clearly unsettled by Nathaniel's bluntness. Nathaniel tapped the persuader with a playful smirk. "Brute force, huh? Call it what you want, but sometimes all it takes is a good whack to knock some sense into a stubborn machine. You can coddle your systems all day, but when things go sideways, you'll be glad someone like me is around to do the dirty work." Lysander, who had been quietly observing the exchange, stepped in to ease the tension. "Technician Stone," he began, his tone calm but firm. "While we appreciate your confidence, you must understand that the Elysium is unlike any ship you've encountered. Its systems are complex, living entities that require a delicate touch. For now, we will assign you to routine maintenance tasks. This will allow you to familiarize yourself with the ship and our methods." Nathaniel raised an unimpressed eyebrow. "Routine maintenance? Fine. I'll handle your precious ship with kid gloves for now. But don't expect me to sit around polishing knobs all day. I'm here to get things done, not babysit a bunch of oversized houseplants." The crew exchanged glances, their skepticism still palpable. Lysander gestured toward a set of consoles at the far end of the bay. "Begin with the environmental control systems. They require constant monitoring and adjustments. This will give you a better understanding of how our living ship interacts with its environment." Nathaniel started toward the consoles, but paused to look back, his smirk widening into a grin. "By the way," he added, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "if it takes your crew 1,000 years just to learn basic math, you're gonna need me for more than just repairs. I might end up teaching your crew a thing or two while I'm here, like counting to 10 without using feathers." The senior technician's feathers puffed out in irritation, but he held his tongue, visibly taken aback by Nathaniel's audacity. Lysander's composure faltered briefly before he regained control. "Technician Stone," he said, his tone carrying a note of warning, "we expect professionalism. Ours is a disciplined crew, and we value respect." Nathaniel shrugged, unfazed. "Respect's a two-way street, boss. Show me some and you'll get it back. Until then, I'll keep doing what I do best, fixing things and cracking jokes. Just don't get your feathers in a twist." As Nathaniel approached the consoles, he could feel the weight of the Veldar's watchful eyes. Their doubts were nothing new to him. People always questioned his methods and attitude until they saw the results. These feathered skeptics would be no different. The environmental control systems were an intricate blend of organic and technological components, with bioluminescent panels and living conduits that pulsed gently as they regulated the ship's atmosphere. Nathaniel's hands moved deftly over the controls as he familiarized himself with the alien systems. "All right, let's see what we've got here," he muttered to himself, half in focus and half in defiance. "Oxygen levels, stable. Humidity's a little high, nothing a quick tweak can't fix. There we go. Easy does it. Not exactly rocket science. Hell, this isn't even basic math." The Veldar technicians observed in silence, their expressions still cautious but clearly intrigued. Nathaniel could tell they were watching closely, perhaps waiting for a mistake, but he was ready to prove them wrong. They were probably just waiting for him to mess up, but Nathaniel had no intention of giving them that satisfaction. After a few hours of work, he completed his assigned tasks and turned back to the crew, wiping his hands on his pants. "All done. She's running smoother than a Avidian brothel on payday." The Veldar Lysander exchanged puzzled glances at his peculiar analogy, though his meaning was clear. Lysander stepped forward, his expression as composed as ever. "You have performed adequately, Technician Stone," he said, his tone even. "But these were minor tasks. The true challenges still lie ahead. We will continue to monitor your work closely." Nathaniel rolled his eyes and let out a short laugh. "Adequately? You're kidding me. You feathered folks are lucky to have me here. But fine, keep your feathers unruffled. Just don't come crying to me when something serious needs fixing." Lysander inclined his head slightly, still unsure how to interpret the brash young Avidian. "We shall see," he repeated, though this time there was the faintest crack in his wall of skepticism. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps something else. As the Veldar Lysander dispersed, Nathaniel allowed himself a small, knowing smile. They might not trust him yet, but that was fine. He'd been proving doubters wrong his whole life. If it took a little time to win over these ancient feathered skeptics, so be it. "Piece of cake," Nathaniel muttered under his breath as he moved toward his next task, the persuader swinging lightly at his belt. The Elysium cruised silently through the vastness of space, its organic hull pulsing faintly with life. Nathaniel had fallen into the rhythm of his assigned tasks, though he wasn't impressed by the glacial pace of the Veldar crew. To him, it seemed they took an eternity to make even the simplest adjustments, their reverence for the ship's living systems more of a hindrance than a help. Slower than a snail in molasses, Nathaniel muttered, as he fine-tuned the ship's environmental controls. He had little patience for their cautious approach. Every task was another reminder that, for all their wisdom and longevity, the Veldar were, in his eyes, agonizingly slow learners. They might live thousands of years, but Nathaniel was convinced they spent most of that time figuring out which end of a wrench to use. His grumbling was interrupted by the sudden blare of alarms. Red warning lights flashed, and the ship's living walls pulsed faster, as if sensing the looming danger. Nathaniel's head snapped up. "Great. What now?" he muttered. The Veldar engineers moved with their usual maddening calm, redirecting power and adjusting systems as reports of an approaching hostile vessel filtered in. Nathaniel caught snippets of the transmission from the command center, a Mordai warship, closing fast with weapons primed. The Mordai were infamous in this sector, aggressive, ruthless, and always spoiling for a fight. Nathaniel glanced at a nearby technician who was calmly redirecting power to the shields. "You might want to pick up the pace," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Those buggy bastards aren't going to wait for you to finish your meditation before they start blowing us to bits." The technician shot him a measured look but said nothing, staying focused on his task. Nathaniel rolled his eyes and turned his attention to the console in front of him, where power fluctuations danced across the screen. The ship shuddered as the first Mordai volley hit, vibrations rippling through its living structure. Bracing himself against the console, Nathaniel gritted his teeth. "Hit them harder!" he barked, though he knew his voice wouldn't reach the command center. "These bugs aren't here to play nice. You've got to squash them before they rip us apart." As the battle raged, Nathaniel noticed the strain on the ship's vital systems. Organic conduits along the walls pulsed erratically, and some of the bioluminescent panels flickered ominously. The Elysium was struggling to keep up with the onslaught. "This is what happens when you're too damn slow," Nathaniel muttered, pulling up a diagnostic screen. His hands flew over the controls as he manually redirected power to compensate for the ship's sluggish response. "If you guys were any slower, you'd be moving backward." The Veldar technicians glanced at him, but remained silent, focused on their tasks. Nathaniel's frustration boiled over as the ship groaned under another powerful blast that hit the engine section. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and critical systems went offline. "Damn it!" he growled, frantically rerouting power from non-essential systems to keep the engines and shields operational. "If you'd just listen to me for once." Then a new alert flashed across his console. Unauthorized access points detected. Boarding parties. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. "Oh, hell no," he muttered. "Those sneaky bastards are coming right for us." He turned to the Veldar technicians, who were reacting to the new threat with their usual measured pace. "You heard the alarms, Feathers. We've got company. If you don't want them tearing this place apart from the inside, I suggest you grab something heavy and get ready to meet them head-on." Nathaniel wasn't about to wait around. Grabbing his persuader, he felt the reassuring weight of the hammer in his grip and headed for the nearest access corridor. Behind him, the Veldar finally began mobilizing, setting up defensive positions as the sound of Mordai boarding pods clanging against the hull echoed through the ship. The corridors of the Elysium were dimly lit by its bioluminescent flora, casting eerie shadows as Nathaniel moved toward the breach point. The hissing and clicking of the Mordai grew louder, signaling their imminent arrival. A wicked grin spread across Nathaniel's face as he tightened his grip on the persuader. "Time to squash some bugs," he muttered, adrenaline surging as he reached the breach point. The Veldar Lysander crew was setting up defenses nearby, their expressions calm but steely as they prepared for the confrontation. The Veldar soldiers set up barriers, their weapons trained on the sealed doors that were buckling under the relentless pressure from the other side. When the doors finally burst open, the Mordai poured in, a swarm of multi-limbed creatures with razor-sharp mandibles like something plucked straight from a nightmare. The Veldar opened fire with precision, cutting down the first wave of attackers, but the Mordai pressed on, undeterred by their losses. Nathaniel didn't wait. Charging forward, he swung his hammer with all his strength. The first Mordai crumpled under the blow, its carapace cracking with a sickening crunch. "That's right, you ugly bastards," Nathaniel shouted, adrenaline surging through him. "Come and get some!" The corridor erupted into chaos. The Veldar fought with their characteristic discipline, but Nathaniel's wild, relentless approach was shockingly effective. He ducked and weaved through the melee, his hammer smashing through Mordai's skulls and severing limbs with savage precision. The invaders, unprepared for such ferocity from a lone Avidian, hesitated just long enough for the Veldar to regain the upper hand. Within minutes, the boarding party had been annihilated or forced to retreat back to their pods. Standing amidst the carnage, Nathaniel was breathing heavily, his hammer slick with viscous alien fluids. He glanced at the Veldar soldiers, who stared at him with a mix of shock and grudging respect. "See? Not so hard if you actually put your back into it," Nathaniel quipped, wiping the hammer clean on a piece of Mordai armor. "Next time, try hitting them before they start tearing your ship apart from the inside." The soldiers exchanged looks, but didn't respond. They quickly returned to securing the corridor and sealing the breach. Satisfied he had made his point, Nathaniel headed back toward the engineering bay, the Persuader swinging at his side. The aftermath of the battle left the Elysium in shambles. The once majestic vessel now limped through space, its organic hull scarred and battered from the Mordai assault. Critical systems were offline, and the ship's usual gentle pulse had become erratic and uneven. The crew moved with unusual urgency, but a heavy tension hung in the air. Nathaniel stood in the engineering bay, poring over the damage reports. The news was grim. The engines were crippled, the power grid was barely functional, and several vital systems were on the verge of failure. Around him, the Veldar engineers worked diligently, their worry evident in their expressions. For all their knowledge and meticulous methods, it was clear they weren't certain they could save the ship. "The ship's a mess," Nathaniel muttered, rubbing the back of his neck as data scrolled across the console. "We're not getting out of this one with duct tape and prayers." Nearby, Lysander and the senior technicians were deep in discussion. Though their voices were low, Nathaniel could hear the frustration in their tones. "We cannot repair the engines with the resources on board," one technician said, his voice strained. "The damage is too extensive," another added, "and the power grid is unstable. If we push it further, we risk total failure." Lysander's face was drawn tight, his feathers slightly ruffled. "Our options are limited," he admitted. "We are stranded. The communications array is offline, so we cannot call for help, nor can we travel to a safer location." The tension thickened as the gravity of their situation sank in. The Elysium was adrift, and without a way to make critical repairs, they were sitting ducks in hostile space. The crew looked to Lysander for guidance, but even the seasoned leader seemed at a loss. It was then that Lysander's gaze shifted to Nathaniel, who was scanning the reports with a furrowed brow. The elder Veldar had long been skeptical of the young Avidian's brash and unorthodox methods, but now, faced with a situation that demanded quick thinking and creativity, he couldn't ignore the possibility that Nathaniel might be their best hope. Clearing his throat, Lysander addressed the room. "Technician Stone," he began, his voice carefully measured, "you have shown resourcefulness in the past, and we find ourselves in need of fresh perspectives. I would ask you to assess the situation and offer your recommendations." The room fell silent as every eye turned to Nathaniel. Skepticism lingered in their gazes. They still saw him as a brash youth with unconventional ideas, but there was also a faint glimmer of hope. Nathaniel didn't miss a beat. "All right, Feathers," he said, stepping forward with his signature swagger. "Let's see what we're dealing with." He quickly pieced together the extent of the damage. The engines were the biggest problem, barely functional and in no condition to propel the ship anywhere. The power grid was another major issue, holding together by a thread. "The engines are toast," Nathaniel said bluntly. "We've got just enough power to keep the lights on, but that's it. If we don't fix the grid, we're dead in the water." Then, with a confident gleam in his eye, he added, "But I've got an idea. We're going to salvage what we need from that Mordai ship we just kicked to hell." The room erupted in murmurs of unease. "You must understand," one senior technician said, his feathers ruffling slightly. "Mordai technology is vastly different from ours. It may not be compatible." Nathaniel shrugged off the concern. "Different tech, same principle. Wiring is wiring. Power's power. I'll make it work. We don't have time to get picky." Lysander hesitated, clearly weighing the risks. "It is a dangerous proposition," he said slowly. "The Mordai are known for booby-trapping their vessels, but you may be right. We have little choice." The Veldar crew exchanged uneasy glances. Salvaging parts from an enemy ship was dangerous, especially with the Mordai's reputation, but Nathaniel's assessment was hard to argue with. They had no other options. "Very well," Lysander said at last. "Prepare a team and proceed with caution, Technician Stone." Nathaniel smirked. "Don't worry, boss. I've got this." "The lives of this crew depend on your success," Lysander said solemnly, his tone carrying the weight of their shared predicament. Nathaniel gave a confident nod, his usual grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Don't worry, Sage. I've got this. Just keep the ship in one piece until I get back." As Nathaniel left the engineering bay to assemble his team, the Veldar Lysander watched him go, their lingering skepticism tempered by the undeniable fact that Nathaniel had proven himself resourceful in the past. Now, more than ever, they needed his unorthodox methods and quick thinking. The Elysium's fate rested on the shoulders of a brash young Ovidian who seemed born to defy the odds. Nathaniel suited up for the mission, securing his toolkit at his side and letting the ever-reliable persuader dangle from his belt. The Veldar technicians, who had reluctantly agreed to accompany him, watched with a mixture of hope and unease as he prepared. Ahead of them loomed the wrecked Mordai ship, a jagged, menacing silhouette adrift in space, a stark contrast to the organic elegance of the Elysium. "You ready for this, Feathers?" Nathaniel quipped, glancing back at his team. "Don't worry, I'll handle the heavy lifting. Just try not to wet yourselves when things get hairy." One of the technicians, visibly uncomfortable, replied, "We're not accustomed to this kind of operation, Technician Stone." Nathaniel smirked. "Yeah, well, I'm not accustomed to babysitting a bunch of overgrown parrots, but here we are. Let's get it done." The Veldar silently nodded, clearly unamused by Nathaniel's manner, but resigned to following his lead. Together, they stepped into the airlock, the doors sealing behind them as the atmosphere was vented. Nathaniel felt the familiar thrill of a challenge rising in his chest. Tight spots were nothing new to him, but salvaging parts from an enemy ship. This was a whole new level of crazy, and he loved it. The airlock doors slid open, revealing the vast emptiness of space and the derelict Mordai vessel ahead. With a push, Nathaniel launched himself across the void, his boots magnetically clamping onto the hull of the alien ship as he made contact. The Veldar followed cautiously, their movements deliberate and careful. As they entered the Mordai ship, Nathaniel was immediately struck by its alien design. The corridors were dark and twisted, lined with pulsating organic conduits that gave the unsettling impression of being alive. The ship's interior was a labyrinth of sharp angles and shadowy recesses, unlike anything Nathaniel had encountered before. "Feels like we're walking through a giant insect's intestines," Nathaniel muttered, glancing back at the Veldar. "Stay close. And for the love of everything, don't touch anything unless I say so. Last thing we need is for one of you to set something off." One of the technicians, his eyes wide as he scanned their surroundings, asked hesitantly, "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" Nathaniel chuckled. "I'm the guy who's been fixing things since before I could tie my own shoes. I'll figure it out. Trust me." They pressed on, navigating the ship's eerie, twisted corridors until they encountered their first obstacle, an energy barrier blocking access to one of the main power conduits. "Looks like the bugs didn't want anyone snooping around," Nathaniel remarked, studying the barrier. "Give me a sec." A Veldar technician peered at the barrier, worry etched across his face. "Isn't this dangerous? What if it's booby-trapped?" Nathaniel grinned, pulling out his plasma spanner. "If it is, we'll find out real quick. Besides, dangerous is part of the job. Now watch and learn." Kneeling down, he pried open a nearby panel, revealing a mess of unfamiliar circuitry. Undeterred, Nathaniel quickly identified the power source for the barrier and began rewiring it. The Veldar technicians watched in silent awe as his hands moved with practiced precision, bypassing the security system in no time. "There," Nathaniel said with a grin as the energy barrier flickered and died. "Piece of cake." "You make it look so easy," one technician muttered uneasily. "But this is Mordai tech. It's nothing like ours." Nathaniel shrugged, smirking. "Different tech, same principles. Wiring is wiring and power's power. I'll make it work. We don't have time to get picky." The group pressed on, encountering more security measures along the way. At one point, they stumbled into a room filled with damaged but still active Morty drones. The drones' red eyes glowed ominously as they detected the intruders. "Feathers, hold them off," Nathaniel shouted, yanking the persuader from his belt. Swinging the hammer with all his might, He smashed one drone into a shower of sparks. "Pests, disgusting," he muttered, flicking alien debris off his weapon. One of the Veldar technicians, struggling to keep up, stammered, "This is insane. How are you so calm?" Nathaniel laughed as he bashed another drone into pieces. "Calm? Who said I'm calm? I'm just better at faking it. Now quit talking and start smashing." Though hesitant at first, the Veldar technicians joined in, using their tools and weapons to finish off the remaining drones. When the fight was over, Nathaniel wiped the sweat from his brow and grinned. "Guess these bugs forgot to put up a real fight. Let's keep moving before they change their minds." After what felt like hours of navigating the alien ship, Nathaniel finally found what he was looking for: the main power distribution node, still intact despite the ship's extensive damage. Kneeling down, he began carefully dismantling it, extracting the critical components with his plasma spanner. "How do you know which parts to take?" one of the Veldar technicians asked, watching him work. "Experience and a little luck," Nathaniel replied without looking up. "And if I screw up, you'll be the first to know." Despite unexpected challenges, including power surges, baffling alien tech, and a hidden trap designed to fry intruders, Nathaniel's quick thinking and resourcefulness shone through. He bypassed circuits, rerouted power, and even disarmed the trap with a steady hand and a few choice words. "More they think they're clever," Nathaniel muttered as he finished defusing the trap. "I've seen better setups in back alley chop shops." Finally, he held up the salvaged components with a triumphant grin. "All right, that should do it. This stuff isn't exactly plug and play, but I'll make it work. Let's get back to the Elysium before the rest of this ship throws another tantrum." The Veldar technicians, impressed by Nathaniel's expertise, followed him back to the airlock without a word. As they returned to the Elysium, Nathaniel couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. He had taken on the challenge, faced the unknown, and come out on top. "Not bad for a goddamn Avidian kid, huh?" Nathaniel said with a grin as he re-entered the engineering bay. The Veldar Lysander didn't respond immediately, but the subtle looks of respect in their ancient eyes spoke volumes. With the salvaged parts in hand, Nathaniel knew they had a fighting chance to bring the Elysium back to life. The battle wasn't over, but thanks to a little Avidian ingenuity, a lot of guts, and just enough vulgarity to grease the wheels, survival was now within reach. Nathaniel wasted no time diving into the delicate task of integrating the Mordai components with the Veldar systems. The engineering bay buzzed with activity, the Veldar engineers working methodically to stabilize the ship's systems. Yet despite their focus, all eyes kept drifting back to Nathaniel, the brash young Avidian who had just taken on the impossible and returned with the tools they desperately needed. "All right, let's see what we've got here," Nathaniel muttered, spreading the salvaged components across a workbench. The alien parts were a strange mix of unfamiliar metals and organic materials, entirely unlike the equipment he was used to. But Nathaniel had never been one to back down from a challenge. The Veldar engineers stood at a safe distance, their expressions a blend of skepticism and cautious hope. Feathered Sage Lysander remained nearby, his gaze fixed intently on Nathaniel as the young technician began his work. The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone understood the high stakes. Nathaniel started carefully connecting the Mordai components to the Veldar systems, his hands moving with practiced precision. Using his plasma spanner, he fused the alien tech into place. At first, everything seemed to be going smoothly, and the tension in the room began to ease. But as Nathaniel attempted to secure a critical part, a power regulator, he hit a major snag. The component was too large for the Veldar housing, and its connectors were entirely incompatible. "Damn it," Nathaniel muttered under his breath, stepping back to reassess the situation. The Veldar engineers, sensing something was wrong, inched closer, their concern evident. "Is there a problem, Technician Stone?" one of them asked, his voice laced with doubt. "It appears the component is unsuitable." Nathaniel shot him a sharp look. "No, Feathers, it's not a perfect match, but I didn't come this far to let a little thing like size stop me." The Veldar Lysander exchanged uneasy glances, uncertainty spreading through the group. Finally, Lysander spoke, his tone serious. "Can you make it work, Nathaniel?" Nathaniel grinned and pulled the persuader from his belt. "I'm about to show you how a real tech gets the job done." The Veldar engineers froze, their unease palpable. They had seen Nathaniel use the hammer aboard the Mordai ship, but this was different. This was their ship, and the thought of applying brute force to such delicate systems made them visibly nervous. Nathaniel, however, wasn't fazed. "All right, you stubborn bastard," he muttered to the uncooperative part. "Time to make you fit." With a few precise swings of the persuader, Nathaniel began reshaping the power regulator, each strike measured to avoid damaging the delicate components. The Veldar crew watched in stunned silence as Nathaniel hammered the alien tech into submission. "Come on, you piece of junk," Nathaniel grunted, making a final adjustment. "There we go, perfect fit." Stepping back, he wiped the sweat from his brow and admired his handiwork. The power regulator was now snugly in place, its connectors aligned just well enough to function. It wasn't pretty, but it would get the job done. One of the Veldar engineers, still in shock, asked hesitantly, "Will it function properly?" Nathaniel smirked, his confidence unwavering. "It'll work. Might not win any beauty contests, but it'll get us out of this mess. Now, let's fire it up and see if it sings." With a few final adjustments, Nathaniel completed the integration and stepped back from the console. "All right, Sage," he called out to Lysander. "Time to flip the switch." Lysander hesitated briefly before nodding to one of the engineers, who activated the power grid. The room held its collective breath as the system hummed to life. Lights flickered, the hum of the ship's systems grew steady, and the Elysium seemed to exhale as power coursed through its veins once more. Nathaniel's grin widened as he turned to the Veldar crew. "Not bad for a goddamn Avidian kid, eh?" The tension that had filled the room dissipated, replaced by relieved cheers and quiet murmurs of approval. Though the Veldar were still stunned by Nathaniel's unconventional methods, they couldn't argue with the results. The Elysium was alive again. Lysander approached Nathaniel, a newfound respect gleaming in his ancient eyes. "You have done well, Technician Stone. The ship owes you its life." Nathaniel shrugged, still holding the persuader. "Just another day at the office, Sage. Now let's get this bird flying again." With the critical repairs complete and the power grid stabilized, the Elysium was ready to resume its journey. The ship's systems hummed steadily, the flickering lights now stable, and the rhythmic thrum of the engines returned. Though the vessel was far from full capacity, being operational was a victory in itself. Nathaniel stood back, the persuader hanging loosely in his grip as he watched the readouts on the console. Everything seemed to be working. Despite the unconventional repairs, the ship was alive again. He let out a long breath, only now feeling the exhaustion settling in. The adrenaline that had kept him going through the ordeal was fading, leaving him drained but deeply satisfied. "Looks like we're back in business," Nathaniel muttered, a tired but triumphant grin spreading across his face. The Veldar crew, who had been holding their collective breath as the ship's systems came back online, began to relax. A few exchanged glances of appreciation, and one or two even nodded respectfully at Nathaniel. One of the engineers spoke cautiously. "Your methods are unconventional, Technician Stone, but you have saved the ship." Nathaniel smirked, brushing off the comment with a wave. "Unconventional gets the job done, Feathers, and if it works, it ain't wrong." "Yeah, well," Nathaniel replied with a smirk, brushing off the thinly veiled compliment. "Sometimes you've got to break a few eggs to make an omelet, or, in this case, smash a few parts until they fit." Feathered Sage Lysander approached. His typically stern demeanor softened ever so slightly. "You have done well, Nathaniel. The Elysium is operational because of your efforts. It may not be perfect, but it is enough to get us through." Nathaniel nodded, a swell of pride rising within him. He'd been through hell and back, but he had come out on top. More importantly, he had earned the respect of these ancient, cautious beings who had once doubted him. They weren't the type to heap praise, but the subtle nods and the way they now regarded him spoke louder than words ever could. "Just doing my job, Sage," Nathaniel said, trying to sound nonchalant even as exhaustion weighed heavily on him. Lysander gave him a long, thoughtful look before nodding again. "You have proven yourself today, not only as a technician, but as a member of this crew. Your skills will be needed as we move forward, and I would ask that you continue assisting us with more critical tasks." It was a significant gesture, a rare and meaningful acknowledgement from the senior sage. The rest of the crew took notice, their quiet observation adding weight to the moment. For the Veldar, this was as close to a formal declaration of someone's value as it got. Nathaniel might have been just a kid in their eyes when he first arrived, but now he was the kid who had saved their ship.